So good morning again, everyone. Leah Martinez here from Rio Hondo College, and you are attending the Male Mentor Building Strong Relationships with Students with Tariq Smith. It's all yours, Tariq.
All right. Welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Again, my name is Tariq Smith, and looking forward to talking through some of my ideas around what it means to be a mentor. So let's go ahead and get started. Um, I always start presentations by just talking a little bit about myself and who I am and how that impacts how I show up as an educator. I've been in education for 27 years. I'm a UCLA graduate. And most of that time in education has been as a high school English teacher. I have also been a literacy coach, and most recently, I was a RJ teacher at a middle school in LUSD, and my current job title is Systems of Support Advisor. That sounds a little fancy, but what that really means is that I support schools around implementing school culture and climate, restorative practices, positive behavior interventions, and supports. And we're definitely going to get to how that connects to some of my beliefs around mentoring. So let me talk a little bit about family. I love that our keynote speaker grounded his growth in education around his family. I feel much the same way as Jose. I don't know who I would be or where I would be without my family. They're definitely kind of like the guiding light and really impact how I show up as an educator. So behind me in the picture up top is my lovely wife. She's actually, I think, on this Zoom, so no pressure there. I gotta make sure I show out for my wife. But she's also in education. She's a professor at West LA Community College, and I really recommend for all of you youngsters starting out in the field of education to maybe try to find a partner who's in education, because there's nothing like being able to share with your wife or partner around what you're experiencing in education. To the left with the very brightly colored hair is my oldest son, Ren, who is now 26. He is actually trans, and I bring that up because it has a huge impact on how I show up as an educator. The learning experience that I was blessed to have once he came out to me, once we kind of navigated that process of him finding his identity and his way. And it's almost a little bit embarrassing to admit like how much I've grown and learned from him. I'm the parent, right? I'm supposed to be doing the teaching. Uh, but I think it really connects to this idea of mentoring, that it's really around um side by side work, right? We think about leading, but we also don't think about how much we learn by leading. And that experience with my son has definitely impacted how I show up as an educator, how I support students that are LGBTQ, um, and how I show up in an area that I actually have a lot of privilege around, being cis and male. Um, on my lap, I think I want to make sure we keep moving, but I'm going to talk a little about my son who is on my lap. He is now 11 years old, and he was born with some really challenging difficulty. He was born with a rare genetic mutation that is marked by pretty severe global delays. He's nonverbal and non-ambulatory, and has a lot of medical challenges. And as a result of that, it's really, again, gotten me to learn in an area that I have more privilege around, being able bodied, um, and able to access curriculum and learning in more traditional ways. And so that's an advantage that I will be honest, I did not interrogate or think about in the way that I do now, having my son Coco as kind of like a inspiration. And again, someone who has ended up teaching me, just like my oldest son, and really like everyone in my family. Um, so I think we'll talk about that more as we kind of go through the presentation, how much of an impact uh, the people around you and their experiences can have on really developing and deepening your understanding of how positionality informs your work and your life. And so we'll definitely get to that more. I always throw up the pictures of snowboarding. That's something that's a deep passion of mine. Um, and so I always like to remind myself and my participants, like this picture in the top corner, that we can all soar under the right conditions. All right, so I am going to do a breakdown of our objectives for today. Um, and please hold me accountable to these. I have a evaluation at the end, and let me know how I did in terms of meeting these objectives for you. So the first one is participants will explore how mirror work is important for being a mentor. So I really want us to think about how a lot of what we do as leaders, how a lot of what we do as mentors, how a lot of what we do as educators is really rooted in deep knowledge and understanding around our own identity, around our own positionality, and how that impacts what we do in the work that we do. And then, secondly, I want to make sure that you all get some tangible strategies that you can add to your toolkit, um, specifically around creating affirming relationships and healthy relationships. So, we're going to be definitely talking about that in today's presentation as well. Yeah, so those are our objectives. Please make sure to hold me accountable. If you feel like I'm not hitting these targets, ask me questions, get me back on target. And I want us to think about today's learning. I always tend to show this triple track agenda idea or concept whenever I'm presenting, because I really want participants to think about the learning that we are doing on these three tracks. So the first thing is I want you to think of yourself as just a learner, right? What new information am I getting? What strategies can I use and apply as a student, as a learner? And then I want all of you to think about what are strategies that you can share with other adults and implement when you are leading or presenting or teaching yourselves. I am assuming that a lot of you might even already be in positions where you're in community with other adults and talking through teaching and learning strategies. And then lastly, I want you to think about, whoops, didn't mean to do that, strategies around how you are teaching or instructing for your students, right? So hopefully there are strategies today that are useful in that way. All right. Let's go ahead and check in. Looks like we have 23 people. I wish we had time to hear every person come off mute and do this, but in the chat, if you could do me a favor, choose a number that coincides with how you're feeling today. And so you're gonna put your number and then a super quick explanation for why. I am going to choose one personally because I am presenting and talking about things that I'm really passionate about and care deeply about. So I am definitely a one, maybe a cooler version of that. I don't know. But yeah, I am a one. So let's see in the chat, and I'll read a few of these. I don't know if I'll have time to read all of them, but I'm definitely curious. Let's see. All right. Oh, my my wife said, "I'm here just taking care of Gogo." I love it. Um, so I'm seeing a lot of ones. I'm seeing some fours, people at peace. All right. Feeling so hopeful and empowered. I love that, Rio. Uh, four, because I am taking this opportunity to reflect on myself. Wow, that is powerful. Okay. I'm 1 and 5. That is absolutely possible. You can be really excited, really, I said excited. You can be really excited and tired at the same time, right? Exhausted. And yes, it is cold outside. Ready to lay in bed and get warm. I love it. All right. Um, so even though we're in a Zoom and Zooms can feel a little impersonal and cold, I always like to start out my presentations by checking in and seeing how folks are doing. When you all are in positions of leading and educating yourselves, I hope you take the time to slow down and check in with folks as well. This is a big part of the work that I do daily. And I always start out with finding out how folks are showing up in whatever setting that I'm in. All right. Thank you, everyone, for sharing in the chat. Let's keep it going. All right. So before I before I get into the work of being a mentor, I wanted to kind of get you all to think about this idea of mirror work. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It means that whatever we are doing as educators, as mentors, as leaders, it starts with identity work. It starts with deep knowledge and understanding about who we are. Um, and that is really how I go forth and do whatever I do. Um, Specifically around mentoring, but also in general. I wanted to show you all this, a little bit of this video. I wish we had time to watch the whole thing. You should definitely check it out when you get a chance. And I'll share the slide deck at the end. So if you want to just easily link to this, you can. But let's listen to the first couple minutes of Yolanda Seeley Ruiz and see what she has to say.
What if we lived in a world where racial literacy was as natural as breathing and love was seen as the solution to all things? Now, think about how racially literate, loving teachers can improve the academic outcomes for Black and Brown children in schools. Take a moment to remember when you felt loved by a teacher or a principal. Hold that feeling. Now imagine what it would mean if every child who walked into a school building felt that, felt love by their teacher, their principal, their classmates. Afrocentric scholar Dr. Asa Hilliard once said, "I have never encountered any children in any group who are not geniuses. There is no mystery on how to teach them. The first thing you do is treat them as human beings. And the second thing you do is love them." We have yet to realize the genius in all of our students and learn how to love them because most of their teachers and educational leaders lack racial literacy. Racial literacy requires the truth about our personal and our collective histories. There are 6 components to the racial literacy development model. I'll say something about that in a moment. But what's most important to understand is that racial literacy requires a deep self-reflection. It calls on us to challenge our ideas, to recognize our biases, and to change what interferes with love. I call this process the archaeology of self. And for me, my research and my practice is centered on archaeology of self. Now, archaeology of self as a term doesn't really show up in education. Of course, there is Michel Foucault's archaeology of knowledge. The term briefly appears in a paper on literary.
I'm going to stop us there. I love this concept of the archaeology of the self. It sounds so scientific, right? Like as a way of thinking about that mirror work.
And now,
All right. Let me get us to look at this idea of the archaeology of self. So this is a definition from Yolanda Seeley Ruiz. So she says that engaging in the archaeology of self involves a self-exploration, probing, and understanding of where issues of race and racism live within the individual and how they impact our society. In education, the process requires that educators personalize race and recognize how it influences their pedagogy. Specifically related to the field of education, archaeology of self helps educators and educational leaders understand that their beliefs about students and their communities dictate how much or how little they will invest in them. Ooh, all right, so that is a mouthful. I'm gonna leave that up there, let you all reread it and digest it a little bit more because I know that's a very dense definition. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. So she mentioned in her speech, Dr. Hilliard, but I wanted to just call out this particular quote. That she references and get you all to think a little bit about this specific one as well. I have never encountered any children in any group who are not geniuses. There is no mystery on how to teach them. The first thing you do is treat them like human beings. And the second thing you do is love them. And again, I'm going to let you reread that one and just kind of marinate on what you think that means. All right. And I know we are on Zoom, but I need to hear from my people that are in this room. So uh I'm gonna turn it over to you all. I'm curious for you. What stands out to you about what Celia Ruiz and Dr. Hilliard were saying, right? What are some things that kind of come to mind as we think about these words and ideas? And feel free to type your thoughts in the chat. I love it. Equity. All right. I'm going to give it a little more time, get some more thoughts coming in. Let me actually go back to the quote because it was dense. Oh, I see people coming in now. All right. So let's go back so you guys can see the quote again. Oh, wow. We got some thinkers in the audience. So let me call out a couple more of these ideas here, and then we'll move forward. So it says you can't guide others without guiding yourself. Nicole, thank you so much for that. I couldn't agree more. Looks like Jonathan says it's important to understand the child on an emotional level to be an effective influence on their lives and let them know they can achieve far beyond their true potential. I love that. Okay, given the Foucault reference, I think about the production of subjectivity by institutions in society. Ooh, all right. We could spend the rest of the session just unpacking that response. Um, but yeah, there really is a lot of subjectivity even in what we value, right? Even in what we give attention to, and what we marginalize or minimize. I love that quote or special way of thinking of her. Everything gets better if the child grows with love. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you're gonna see how love is threaded throughout this entire presentation. I've really only been able to make sense of what I do in education and as a mentor by approaching things from the perspective of love, right? Like there's never a point where my own children have to guess if I care about or love them, right? And I think the same thing should be true for children that we are raising up to our educational system. Okay. Let's go ahead and keep it moving. And thank you everybody that is participating in the chat. That really helps. I love hearing all y'all's thinking. Okay, yeah, awesome. Avoiding downplaying the truth. Okay. So we talked about this mirror work. Hopefully that concept is starting to crystallize for you and make a little bit of sense. I think that I can further help cement this idea of mirror work by kind of talking a little bit about what I do in my job. So I was a restorative justice teacher, as I said, at a middle school for a while in South LA. Um, and I'm now in a position where I'm essentially training and providing assistance at schools and support around implementing restorative practices and, affirming practices that feel more healthy and less punitive for our students. And that hopefully allow them the grace, dignity, love, and care that we all deserve as students, right? Even our keynote speaker was kind of alluding to that. Um, and I find these two quotes really useful in the way that I think about mentoring and the way that I think about my daily work. So again, mentoring is motivated by love, right? If we're really bringing folks forward, helping people see their true potential, we do that through demonstrated care and love. And I love this last one here. It says, it is only in the giving of oneself that we truly live. And as someone who really prioritizes service to others in my family, I am all about service to others. And in my work, I am all about service to others. It is truly what makes me feel activated and alive to see the light get brighter in a child's eyes, right? Through something that you provided or help them to unlock about themselves. So let's talk a little bit about some of the kind of founding principles of RJ so that you all can see the connection in terms of how mentoring and the process of providing care and leadership is really embedded in a lot of these restorative justice practices. And as has been acknowledged already in the presentation, this is really about our ancestors. This is really about a deep history of community. And so you can see that when we think about the circle process, when we think about restorative justice, it's really got a deep history in indigenous practices, right? Um, Around keeping community, around non-hierarchical power structures, right? That really allow us to develop and care about each other. And those practices are deeply indigenous. And one of the things that I love about RJ or restorative practices in a more general sense is that it's really people of color's best chance to be humanized, um, to have agency right? To not have things done to them, but to feel like they are a participant in a community, right? And so you can see this triangle here. I'm always presenting this when I do my professional development at the schools that I support. And it's the idea that we want to build positive community and connection. It's the idea that uh, everything that we do in teaching and learning is relational, right? It's built on the idea that we're exchanging care back and forth, right? That um, it is based on me feeling like I can be my authentic self and have that affirmed at the school, right? Once I feel affirmed, once I feel heard, once I feel valued, once I feel like I'm a part of something, then I'm able to learn, right? And without that, the conditions don't exist for us to learn. So I'm going to go over a few strategies that I want you all to think about implementing. And it's funny that my wife is here because when I think about applying this stuff, not only am I applying it at work, I'm applying it at home. When I think about how to talk to my son, my 12-year-old, I'm thinking specifically about, who is in middle school right now. I need to use these skills and approaches to have you know, more affirming communication with him, less tense and violent communication, right? We don't, we can certainly get our way by being coercive, right? As educators, as leaders, as parents even. But I want to make sure that I always take it back to the teaching and a gentle approach, right? That's like affirming of the people that I'm working with humanity. So effective statements, restorative justice questions, restorative language, community building circles are some things that we're going to talk about a little bit right now. I do want to start by having you all think about these 7 core assumptions. Super important. These are kind of like the underpinning beliefs around restorative justice. So the first is that the true self in everyone is good, wise, and powerful. The second is that the world is profoundly interconnected. The third is that all human beings have a deep desire to be in a good relationship. Fourth is that all human beings have gifts and everyone is needed for what they bring. And then 5, everything we need to make positive change is already here. And then 6, human beings are holistic. And then lastly, we need practices to build habits of living from the core self. And I'm curious, we can do this in the chat as well. Which one of these is something that you feel like you are particularly good at, or that sounds like something that you deeply believe? And we could just put the number, save a little time on typing. And I'm going to put 1 for me. Oh, I love it. So you can see there's a lot of variety here. Not to favor my wife, I love that she called out 5. Everything we need to make positive change is already here. And I think that's especially important as we're thinking about working with Black children, as we think about working with children of color, right? Uh, often we approach them as if they are victims or lacking in agency. And I find that just not to be the case. I've been inspired so many times by students that I work with and their ability to be resilient and crafty and excellent, right? And it's because they have everything they need inside of them already. It's just about unlocking those things. All right, let's keep going. So these are restorative community agreements. And again, you'll notice that all of these agreements are really around teaching a certain habit or approach, right, to even being in community, to talking with each other. And I'm just going to read real quick from my favorite talking piece. This is a plaque that former students gave me, and it says, I felt like it was appropriate to kind of talk about this. And I always tell this story when I am presenting and doing circles and leading them. So this is a talking piece I use. To the world's best mentor, mediator, and teacher, Mr. Smith, thank you for everything you've done to help us. You'll never be forgotten. We will miss you. With love, Karina and Sarkis. And so I think it's interesting that even in this plaque, they mentioned me being a mentor. But I have to be honest, I learned as much as I taught, and I'm super proud of all the things that both of these youngsters went on to do. They are amazing parents now. I went to both of their weddings. I go to their children's birthday parties. And so it really is possible um, to not only guide and lead, but also to learn and grow from the people that you guide and lead. All right, moving us along. So the next thing I wanted you to think about is restorative questions. And these are really useful to deepen just everyday conversations that you have, and as a strategy specifically in school settings when things go wrong, when harm is caused. So I think that there's particular application around being a mentor with these questions, because part of what you need to do as a mentor is be excellent at listening, right? Be excellent at probing in a way that shows care, um, to really break down folks' defenses and get at what's really underneath the surface for them. So questions are: what happened? What were you thinking about at the time? What have you thought about since? Uh, who do you think has been affected by your actions, and in what way? And then what do you think you need to do to make things as right as possible? All right. So those are questions that I recommend using in as many situations as possible to get at a deeper truth. And then these are effective statements. There's really an emphasis on positivity and addressing harm. And effective statements are things that we say to like label the emotion that we feel when we see a behavior, right? Um, I am so proud of the work that you just did. It makes me so happy to see how kind you are to other students in the classroom, right? And we can use it to address um, when things go wrong, right? Stop teasing Sandy isn't as useful to me as it makes me uncomfortable when I hear you teasing Sandy, right? Um, and so effective statements, again, something that I'm working on using in my professional life and also in my personal life, right? So that I can label the emotion, so that I can center that we do have impact on the people that we are in community with by how we treat them, right? So if somebody is doing something amazing and I can affirm that and label the emotion, it makes me so impressed, how you're showing up in this moment. And then especially with students that are struggling, that are learning the behaviors that we want them to exhibit, this really helps them to cement, right, through that positive praise and approval, that they're doing well. That was pretty fast, but demonstrated previously was you all's intelligence and ability to stay with me. So I'm kind of curious. I want to take some time to process. Um, what are some things that you've learned around strategies, around restorative practices, and yeah, what are some things that are on your mind based on the concepts that we've just been looking at and thinking about.
Think like one thing that I learned during this presentation was that racial literacy requires self-reflection as well as challenging our ideas and biases to learn to be able to appreciate what a children could bring to the table. Because it's we tend to think that as educators we're just strictly teaching them and like we're the teacher, they're the student, but I think we learn from like every single year when we're educating children, we learn a lot from them, and we also like sometimes like are open to changing our approaches as well. I think to how we can provide the best possible support for our children and the education.
All right, Jonathan, thank you for coming off mute. I appreciate that. And that is so well said. I love the idea that yes, absolutely, we are learning from our children, right? And I think we also have to really think about ways of decentering ourselves, right? Yeah, let's hear from some other folks in the chat or off mute. Oh, I hear you, Rosie. Oh, tough choices. Yeah, I wish I could give you teleportation powers and have you in two places at the same time. But thank you for being here. Yeah. Oh, and thank you, Leah, for mentioning that. All sessions are being recorded, right? So hopefully you get the chance to go back in and get the information that you feel like you're missing out on. All right. So what are some other things that are coming up for us or that we are thinking
I,
about?
Hi, Drake. I have a quick question just in terms of
Yeah.
your professional practice, how you might handle the sort of like general atmosphere of black and brown males as educators working in the restorative practice space, but then in the larger society having to face um, you know uh, images or arguments or whatnot that have to do with the criminalization of black and brown males, rather than have them being seen as caregivers in society, automatically evoking sort of like this punitive measure such that black and brown males are not accepted in education even as teachers. How does that impact your work in restorative practices?
Yeah. Whew. How much time do I have? So I think a couple of things. I think the first thing that I am always doing, and this is really important for us to consider around gender. There's a lot of unfair expectations of masculinity that are placed on men in general, but I think in very specific ways for men of color. Um, and so I think I try to serve as a counter narrative for that, first of all, by being vulnerable, open, honest, emotionally intelligent, and really like aggressively affirming like the humanity of the black children, the black men that I work with specifically. Um and and really like modeling healthy approaches, right, to being a man um in this world that assumes that we are violent, right, that we are full of rage, right, that we are angry, and that we are incapable of um being healthy, right? And so I think that modeling goes a long way. I think really approaching students in a way that demonstrates care and that it's demonstrated over time. I have a couple pictures that I'm going to show you later in the presentation too that I think will get at your answer in a much more specific way. So let me move us forward to that actually. Ooh, I gotta read this comment though. I learned to treat people as human and love them. I know I have learned to be a human first, then I can be able to think right. I love that. Um, Okay, let me move us forward. So this is I wanted to kind of wrap up by talking about some specific folks. And I've been in education for 27 years, so I have a lot of stories like the ones that are in front of you right here. I'm gonna start in the bottom right corner. That's me and my oldest son at a concert a couple weeks ago, and it's a real full circle moment. We both love music. We both love going to shows together, but I can't even tell you how actualized this young man is, like self-sufficient, full of joy, integrity, efficacy. And, I do want to take some small credit for that. But, part of it is just like getting out of the way and letting him soar. The two other pictures, the one on the left is a former student that I had at Carver. He graduated from Santee High School last year, and he was a really challenging student in middle school. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I know that the way people come in is not the way that they end. And you have to like trust the process and keep putting in positive input. And no one expected this child to um get even to the point that he's gotten, right? And to see like that smile, that joy on his face, um, the pride that he had when I popped up, to really bear witness to him accomplishing this goal, especially given the family background, the struggle that's embedded, having an older brother who was in gangs, having uncles in gangs, father locked up, right? And like able to overcome all of that because of a lot of people. And these pictures have other people in them, right? It's not just me. These are other people that I work with who had an unfailing belief in what was possible for these children. And then you can see my guy Mark here. He's got on some slides. He's got on his wave cap, right? But he showed up and he did it on his own. Like nobody even brought him to the graduation that day because he's really been raising himself his whole life. You know what I mean? So for him to make it to this point and for me to have like some small part in that, like I'm deeply humbled, right? To show up. But you can't do it unless you're aware um and hopeful even in the face of like the obstacles that these kids face, and you got to show them the way. All right, so I'm gonna leave y'all with a quick couple of quotes. um this one, woof, from Dr. Goldie Muhammad: love is interrupting the numbness and distance we feel when others are oppressed, hurt, or harmed. And then the last one I want you all to think about, I know this one's a little bit longer, but the work we do in education is not just about graduating students or ensuring they pass state assessments. It is about human development and helping children come to self and recognize and celebrate their own genius. Before we can do that well, though, we must reflect on ourselves as educators. All right. So I'm putting up our link to the slides and evaluation. So the first one is for the slides, if you need to have a chance to look back at those and engage with some of those ideas a little bit more. And then I really would appreciate an evaluation. So there's an exit ticket as well. Those links are obviously case sensitive, so make sure you type it in exactly how it appears. And I would love to hear y'all's feedback. And any last comments or thoughts? I know I'm right at the end of my time here. I know I'm at the end of my time here, but anybody who has last thoughts or comments as we wrap up and evaluate, more than happy to hear from you.
I'll share quickly. I put in the chat that reflecting on oneself is an important theme that we've heard throughout this presentation, and I think it really resonates because of the power that we have as educators to impact the students that we work with. And so it really, really starts with us. And it's a challenging thing to exercise that muscle to really reflect and be open to change and to grow and to check our biases. But that is so important if we can look inward, because that impact, whether we see whether it's seen or unseen, is really going to um, influence and impact the students that we work with. So that reflection, that self-reflection for me is really key. And it's something that, you know, it might sound cliche, we hear it a lot, but to really be able to do that, I think can be challenging.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All
I have
right.
another comment if there's
Benjamin?
time. If there's time, Tariq, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Given you know, this is a very, you know, sensitive example, so, you know, kind of like a trigger word warning here. But in
Yeah.
sort of the wake of like the, you know, the recent election and the Dobbs decision and all of this, we've seen a lot of bullying being done, you know, toward women, girls in society and social media, young men saying, you know, your body, my choice. And I want to understand from your perspective, when this goes on in school, how how a school culture can prepare itself for this sort of discrimination and bullying and harassment, given like the specific phrasing of that sort of like, just meditate on that for a minute, like your body, my choice, and that sort of thrust, you know, to.
Yeah. Wow. That's a real question. So I think the first thing is for me to not make light of the complexity of what you're talking about, right? Like that's deeply rooted in, you know, a like generational history of oppression, right? In this country and marginalization. And the amazing thing is how much students are able to be like trained up around these things, how much if we empower students to have voice that they correct themselves. You know, I had an experience at the middle school that I worked at where a lot of Latino students were using the N-word and not really considering how that might be hurtful or impactful for Black students at the school. And so rather than coming down on those kids like a ton of bricks, especially students who didn't even understand how they were using oppressive language, right? I spent time building relationships with those students, right? Really earning their trust, really demonstrating care like over time. And then from there saying, you know, this is hurtful, like this has an impact, right? Once you built that community with students and they can hear you, you know, I never really had a problem with students saying language like that around me because they're like, oh, it's Smith. Oh, okay. You know, like let me show up for him, right? Because he shows up for me, and this is something that he's asking me to do better. And I think it is a, you know, it is I am not trying to minimize the impact of like systems or oppressive structures, but in schools, I have unfailing hope in students' ability to like see each other and care for each other. And once those relationships are built, it's amazing how empowering they can be. Like we really didn't have problems at that school around LGBTQ issues, like the way that they would show up for each other, right? And like really stand up for folks who might feel marginalized, it was amazing, right? And this is in a Black and brown school, right? Where a lot of oppression almost happens by accident, right? Because people are just picking up tools of oppression that they don't fully understand. And so I think it's about giving them that context and helping them through that, but you always start with relationships. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna let y'all go because I'm probably gonna keep you from getting your prizes and getting back into the main session. I don't want to be the enemy of that kind of progress. But thank you so much for your time and really appreciate the super thoughtful engagement and questions. And looking forward to talking more when we do the panel. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.